When the world presses on you with insults, chaos, misunderstandings, or judgment, you have two choices: react or rise. Most people react. They defend, they explain, they argue. They allow the external to dictate their internal state. But a Stoic does something different. He transcends. Because emotional strength isn't about winning debates or proving yourself right to others. It's about not needing to. It's about standing still when the storm hits. Calm, clear, unshaken. Not because you've escaped the chaos, but because you've become stronger than it, more resilient to its impact. In a world that feeds off emotional triggers and digital outrage, where every provocation is designed to extract a reaction, there's rare power in restraint, in silence, in choosing your response instead of being owned by your reaction. And that's what this episode is about. How to become emotionally untouchable, not through cold detachment or indifference, but through radical clarity. Through mastering yourself so fully that no one else gets to dictate your peace. These 12 Stoic principles will train your inner world to stay still while the outer one shakes. If you're ready to stop giving your peace away to people who haven't earned it, to circumstances that don't deserve it, this is where that begins. 1. You cannot be triggered by what you no longer seek. People think they get angry because of what someone else said or did. But what really stirs the fire inside us is not the event itself, but the expectation. The ego doesn't rage because someone rejected you. It rages because deep down you were hoping they wouldn't. You expected attention, you wanted recognition, you sought control. And when reality didn't match your desire, the emotion rose to defend your illusion. That's not strength, that's emotional slavery dressed in reaction. The Stoic sees this clearly. He doesn't just suppress emotion, he dissects it. He looks behind the insult, beyond the provocation, and finds the true root of his discomfort. Attachment, not to people but to outcomes. He realizes that pain enters not through the world, but through his own door. The door he left unlocked by wanting something from someone who could never truly give it. Ask yourself this: when was the last time someone's silence bothered you? Now ask, was it their silence or your need to be heard, to be acknowledged? The last time someone rejected you, did the pain come from their action or from your hope that they stay, that they approve? That small hope, often unspoken, unconscious, that's what makes you emotionally fragile. It's not the world that breaks you, it's the craving you wrapped around it. And here's the turning point. Once you stop seeking that thing, that validation, that control, that specific outcome, the same situations lose their sting. If you no longer need validation, an insult becomes an opinion, nothing more. If you no longer crave attention, being ignored becomes peaceful silence. If you no longer expect someone to change, their behavior becomes a lesson, not a wound. That is the moment you become untouchable. Not because you've hardened, not because you've become indifferent, but because you've surrendered the very needs that made you breakable. Most people live as emotional puppets, their strings pulled by approval, likes, apologies, praise, revenge. But the Stoic cuts those strings one by one, not by hating people, but by reclaiming himself. When you stop handing out pieces of your power in exchange for validation, you begin to walk through life with a presence that can't be shaken, a presence rooted in self-command. You don't have to be indifferent. You just have to stop depending. You don't need to close your heart to love or connection, only your expectations. Let people be who they are. Let the world move as it will. And in the middle of it all, you stand still. Not numb, but grounded. That's the difference between reacting and responding. The first is a reflex of the wounded. The second is a skill of the free. So here's your challenge. Write down what still has power over your emotions. Be honest. Is it your need to be respected, loved, heard, understood? Write it, face it. Then imagine yourself without that need. Who would you be? How would you walk into a room if you no longer needed anyone to like you? How would you respond to criticism if you didn't secretly want to be praised? The moment you no longer seek it is the moment it can no longer hurt you. That's how you become emotionally untouchable. You don't fight the triggers, you dissolve the craving. You disarm yourself not from weakness but from wisdom. And what remains is silence, stillness, power. 2. Every insult is an opinion, not a truth. There is a quiet power in realizing this. Most of what hurts you was never a fact. It was a sentence, a look, a tone, a projection from another person's inner world. Someone spoke from their own lens, their own pain, their own limitations. And you, without realizing it, picked up their opinion and wore it like a name tag, internalizing it as truth. But what if you had paused? What if you had questioned it before absorbing it? The Stoic doesn't take every word as gospel. He examines it like a scientist. Is this true, he asks? Is it aligned with who I know myself to be? Because the truth, real truth, doesn't hurt. It liberates. If a comment wounds you, it's often because there's a part of you that fears it might be right. Or worse, a part of you that's tied your worth to that person's approval. Most people don't speak to reveal truth. They speak to defend their insecurities. They insult when they feel small. They lash out when they're afraid. They judge to elevate themselves. The insult then is rarely about you. It's a mirror of them, their inner chaos, not your value. But if you don't see that clearly, you'll spend your life dancing to the rhythm of other people's wounds and unresolved issues. Consider this. If someone called you a tree, would you be offended? Of course not. You know you're not a tree. You wouldn't even think twice. So why does it sting when someone calls you selfish or weak or arrogant? Because deep down you're not sure, or you're still seeking to be seen as the opposite. That uncertainty is what gives the insult its poison, its power to penetrate. The Stoic principle here is simple but life-changing. Separate fact from opinion, and treat all opinions, especially those that come coded in anger or malice, as data, not doctrine. You can observe them, even learn from them if there's a grain of truth, but never submit to them or internalize them as your own truth. If someone calls you worthless, you can ask, is that true? Who defines my worth? Is it their voice or my values? Marcus Aurelius wrote, choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed and you haven't been. It sounds too simple, too passive, almost like denial, but it's not about ignoring reality. It's about claiming authorship over it. You decide what enters your soul. You decide which arrows hit and which fall harmlessly at your feet. You don't become untouchable by building walls of defensiveness. You become untouchable by removing false authority from your mind. You strip others of their imagined power to define you, and in doing so, you return to your own center. The place where only reason, virtue, and inner to speak. So here's your task. The next time you feel the sting of someone's words, pause. Don't react. Ask, is this truth or opinion? And then remind yourself, an opinion, no matter how loud or cruel, cannot define a reality you've already owned. This is how you become emotionally untouchable, not by silencing the world, but by refusing to let its noise override your clarity. 3. You are only hurt when your ego is invested. Think about the last time you felt truly wounded by someone's words or actions. Was it because what they said was deeply insightful, rooted in wisdom, offered with care for your growth? Or was it because your pride, your identity, your image had something to lose in that moment? Most emotional pain isn't about what actually happened. It's about what we attach to what happened. The Stoics understood this long before modern psychology. We suffer not from the thing itself, but from the story we tell ourselves about it and the investment we have in that story. If you identify too strongly with how people see you, every disagreement feels like a threat to your existence. If you tie your worth to being respected, admired, or liked, then any moment of rejection feels like erasure. And if you rely on being seen as successful, competent, or virtuous, even a small criticism can feel like a collapse of your entire being. But who exactly is collapsing? It's not your character, it's not your core, it's your ego, that fragile image you've built, not for truth, but for comfort and external validation. To be clear, ego is not confidence. Confidence is quiet. Ego is loud. Confidence is rooted in evidence and values. Ego is inflated by praise and terrified of exposure. The Stoic doesn't fight ego with more ego. He dissolves it by stepping away from the illusion of image. He doesn't ask, how do they see me? But instead, am I living in alignment with what I value? Because the moment your sense of self depends on others' perception, you've already surrendered your peace. This is why criticism feels unbearable when you still believe your identity is fragile, a glass vase teetering. But what if you no longer needed to protect that identity? What if you knew that insults bounce off truth like arrows off armor? Not because you're cold or defensive, but because you've stopped seeing your ego as worth protecting. That's where emotional invincibility begins. Seneca said, "What need is there to weep over parts of life? The whole of it calls for tears." But even in that poetic grief, he taught that what we control is how we interpret pain. The Stoic path doesn't eliminate injury, but it empties injury of power. If someone mocks you and you laugh, the insult dies in your breath, deprived of the fuel of your reaction. But if someone mocks you and you tense, defend, and spiral, it was not their words that hurt you. It was your investment in the mask you were wearing, the image you were trying to protect. So how do you begin to disinvest from ego? Start by noticing where your sensitivity lives. Is it when you're ignored, challenged, misunderstood? Wherever you feel that sting, look deeper. There is usually a belief that your value depends on being seen in a certain way. That belief is optional, and that belief, more than any insult, is what causes the pain. When you detach from the need to be seen as important, flawless, or always right, you unlock a kind of freedom most people never taste. You become someone who can walk through misunderstanding without explaining, through rejection without shrinking, through offense without defending. That doesn't mean you're passive. It means you've stepped into a higher power, the kind that doesn't need to prove itself. And from that place, you gain the ability to respond to the world with clarity, not reaction. To hear someone's judgment and say, maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong, either way I know who I am. That's not detachment in the cold sense, it's ownership. Ownership of your internal world, the only world that truly belongs to you. So if you want to stop getting hurt by every careless word or every unfair moment, don't fight harder. Let go. Let go of the image. Let go of the armor. Let go of the exhausting need to be seen as perfect. Ego dies, and in its place, real peace is born. For the trigger is not them, it's your attachment. 4. The trigger is not them, it's your attachment. It's easy to believe that other people are the reason we lose our calm. The rude stranger, the dismissive friend, the passive-aggressive partner. They all seem like they're holding the remote to our emotions, able to press the buttons that dictate our mood. But the Stoic knows the problem isn't the button. It's the wire we've allowed to stay connected, the attachment that grants them power. You cannot be triggered by something you've made peace with. You are only shaken when you're still attached to how things should be, not how they are. Most of what upsets us isn't new. It's familiar, that tension you feel when someone ignores you. It's not about them, it's about your attachment to being acknowledged, to being seen. That sting when someone questions your choices. It's not their words, it's your attachment to being right, to being respected. The discomfort, the frustration, the emotional spirals, they all trace back to one thing, a hidden grip we haven't yet released. We cling to expectations like invisible contracts. People should treat me this way. Life should go that way. I should be seen, understood, validated. And when reality violates those contracts, even silently, even unknowingly, we feel betrayed. But Stoicism isn't about changing people so they stop triggering us. It's about changing the parts of ourselves that get triggered in the first place. There's a powerful difference between having a preference and being attached. A preference says, I'd like it if things went this way. An attachment says, I'll be unhappy unless they do. The Stoic lives with preferences but is ruled by none. He appreciates approval, kindness, recognition, but he isn't anchored to them. When they're there, fine. When they're gone, he remains whole. Think about it this way. Your emotions are like alarms. If you feel rage, insecurity, jealousy, fear, those are not proof that the world is broken. They're proof that you've still got some rewiring to do, some attachments to release, and the great gift is that this work is internal. You don't have to wait for others to change. You just have to start noticing where you're holding on too tightly. This doesn't mean becoming numb. Stoicism isn't about becoming indifferent. It's about becoming independent. Independent of the roller coaster of external events. Independent of the validation chase. Independent of the myth that your peace belongs to anyone else. Let's make this practical. Start asking yourself this simple question every time something stirs you. What am I attached to right now? If someone cuts you off in traffic, are you attached to being respected on the road? If a friend forgets to reply, then are you attached to being prioritized? If your work goes unnoticed, then are you attached to recognition? In each case, notice the internal story. They shouldn't do that. I deserve better. This isn't fair. These are the whispers of attachment. The Stoic doesn't fight them with force. He observes them, then releases them. He understands that peace doesn't come from forcing the world into alignment. It comes from loosening the grip on the expectations that never belong to him. As Epictetus reminded us, it is not things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them. And it is our opinions that form our attachments. Our belief that something is necessary for our happiness. That is the real trigger. So the next time someone says something that offends you, ask what part of me is still holding on. When you feel excluded, insulted, or forgotten, ask what wound is this touching. Awareness is the beginning of detachment. And detachment, not in the sense of coldness, but in the sense of liberation, is where your power returns. Because when you're no longer triggered by what others do, you reclaim full authorship of your inner world. And in that world, you write the rules. You choose the meanings. You set the tone. No one else. 5. Master your inner dialogue and you master your reactions. The greatest war isn't waged on battlefields or between nations. It's fought in the quiet of your own mind. And too often it's a war you don't even know you're losing. You react to the world not based on what's happening, but based on the story you're telling yourself about it. That story, the quiet, constant voice in your head, is the real puppet master. Control it and the strings fall away. Leave it untamed and you'll forever be a slave to your own emotions. Imagine waking up to a cloudy sky. The day hasn't even begun, but that inner voice already starts. Another miserable day. I can't deal with this. Everything goes wrong when the weather's bad. And just like that, your mind sets the tone for the day before anything even happens. It's not the sky that made your day hard. It's the interpretation you chose. That's the power and danger of your inner dialogue. Now picture a Stoic in the same situation. He sees the clouds too, but his mind says something different. A gray sky is just that, a sky. I will not let a color decide my mood. I carry my own weather. This isn't forced optimism, it's trained perspective. It's the result of deliberate practice of sculpting thought until it serves, not sabotages. What you say to yourself, especially in moments of stress, pain, or conflict, determines how you show up. The person who cuts you off in traffic. You can tell yourself, they're out to get me. People are so disrespectful. Or you can say, maybe they're rushing to help someone. Either way, I refuse to give my peace to a stranger's actions. Same event, two reactions, depending on one thing, your inner voice. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius didn't just write meditations for the world. He wrote them to himself. Daily reminders to guard his mind, correct his thoughts, and keep his power centered within. He knew that the way we speak to ourselves becomes the blueprint of how we experience reality. Ask yourself this, is your inner dialogue a mentor or a bully? Does it encourage calm or fuel chaos? When something goes wrong, do you hear, of course I always mess things up? Or, this is hard, but I can respond with clarity. These voices shape everything. Your confidence, your patience, your ability to forgive, your strength under pressure. Change them and your entire life changes. This doesn't mean pretending nothing affects you. It means narrating your life in a way that builds you rather than breaks you. A Stoic doesn't avoid difficulty. He reframes it. Instead of saying that why is this happening to me, he asks, what is this teaching me? That simple shift transforms pain into wisdom, struggle into training, chaos into clarity. But mastering your inner dialogue doesn't happen by accident. It's a discipline, a quiet daily repetition of choosing better thoughts. You pause, you question the story, you replace it with something truer, calmer, more aligned with who you want to be. Over time, the voice that once attacked you becomes one that protects you. It becomes a refuge, not a battlefield. Try this in your next moment of irritation. Before reacting, listen to what you're saying inside. Then interrupt it. Say to yourself, I am not this emotion, I am not this thought. I can observe without obeying. That space between stimulus and response is where your power lives. Build it, strengthen it, stand guard at the gates of your mind. Because once you master that space, the outside world loses its grip. The Stoic doesn't aim to eliminate emotion, but to prevent being ruled by it. And the path begins with language, not what's spoken, but what's thought. With time, your inner dialogue becomes not only your shield, but your sword. Calm, clear, precise, and utterly untouchable. 6. You don't need to win, you need to remain centered. So many people walk into conversations, challenges, and even relationships with one unconscious obsession. I must win. Win the argument. Win the attention. Win the validation. But the Stoic doesn't play that game because he knows the real victory has nothing to do with dominating others and everything to do with not losing himself. The need to win is often just insecurity dressed in ambition. It's the fear of being seen as weak. It's the craving to be admired even when it costs you your peace. Let's be honest. Most of what we fight about in life doesn't need to be won, it needs to be let go. And yet, we keep trying to outtalk someone in a debate that won't matter in a week. We get hooked on proving a point, correcting a misunderstanding, or being seen as right. But what if winning wasn't the goal? What if the goal was to walk away still aligned with your values, still calm, still focused? The man who must win is the man who can always be baited. He's emotionally available to anyone who presses the right button. The moment someone challenges his ego, he abandons reason. But the Stoic doesn't flinch because he doesn't enter the ring. He doesn't need to show dominance. He doesn't seek to correct every opinion or control every perception. He simply asks, what response keeps me in integrity? What action preserves my inner stillness? This doesn't mean being passive. It doesn't mean letting people walk all over you. It means recognizing the difference between acting from purpose and reacting from pride. The Stoic sees the game and chooses not to play, not out of weakness, but wisdom. Because staying centered, especially when you're provoked, is one of the highest forms of strength. Seneca once wrote, "A quarrel is quickly settled when deserted by one party." It's not cowardice, it's clarity. If someone insults you, misjudges you, or tries to pull you into their chaos, your power lies in staying anchored. Ask yourself, if I engage, do I gain peace or lose it? Because there are battles that build you and battles that drain you. And the wise man learns to tell the difference. In today's world where everyone wants the last word, the cleverest reply, or the viral comeback, restraint is rare. But restraint is the root of control. It's what allows you to see the bigger picture. You don't need to clap back or correct every misperception. You need to guard your energy. Because when your focus is pulled into unnecessary fights, your mission is compromised. And the Stoic doesn't waste his mission for momentary ego gratification. The next time someone challenges you, ask yourself, do I want to win this or do I want to remain in command of myself? One will give you a short-term high. The other will give you long-term peace. One inflates the ego, the other strengthens the soul. And that's the difference between playing to impress and living with purpose. Some people enter your life just to test how easily you'll abandon your calm. Don't let them succeed. Smile if you must. Step back if you need. But always return to your center. The one who stays centered doesn't just avoid chaos. He transforms it. He becomes the one others can't manipulate, unsettle, or control. That is the Stoic victory. Not dominance, but discipline. Not reaction, but reason. When you stop needing to win, you become the one who can't be defeated because your power no longer depends on applause, agreement, or outcome. It flows from within, untouched by the noise. 7. Silence is your sword. Use it wisely. There is a rare kind of strength that doesn't shout, doesn't argue, doesn't chase. It simply observes in silence. Most people underestimate the force of silence because they're too used to noise. They believe power is expressed in volume, speed, and reaction. But the Stoic knows the man who masters silence masters influence because he becomes unpredictable, unmoved, and unreadable. Silence in the right hands becomes a sword, not for attack but for precision and restraint. When you choose silence in a world addicted to over-explaining, you reclaim something sacred: control. You refuse to be pulled into chaos just because someone else has lost control of their own emotions. You don't speak to defend your worth. You don't react to every insult. You don't clarify for those committed to misunderstanding you. You simply are. And that presence, untouched by noise, speaks louder than any words ever could. Silence doesn't mean weakness. It means you've evolved beyond the need to participate in every conflict. It means you've realized that some words cannot be unseen or unheard, and some battles are won by not showing up at all. When someone tries to provoke you and you offer stillness instead of reaction, you disarm them completely. They expect fire. You give them still water, and in that stillness, they see their own reflection, not yours. It takes far more strength to remain silent than to lash out. Anyone can explode. Anyone can argue, but it takes deep discipline to pause, to breathe, and to let the moment pass without becoming it. The Stoic trains himself in this pause because he knows it's where wisdom lives. In silence, you can hear your own thoughts clearly. In silence, you can sense your true motives before acting. And in silence, you can see through the noise of others and realize what actually deserves your energy. Think of how many conflicts could have been avoided if someone simply paused. Think of how many regrets were born from words spoken too quickly. The Stoic doesn't aim to be silent forever. He simply chooses to speak with purpose, not reaction. His silence is intentional. It's the space where he realigns with reason before responding. And when he finally does speak, his words land with weight because they're not scattered. They're sharpened. The world today is loud. Social media rewards outrage. News cycles thrive on division. Conversations are often competitions. But amidst all that, silence becomes rebellion. It becomes protection. It becomes elegance. When you can walk away from gossip, when you can resist the urge to correct every misperception, when you can sit in silence while others unravel, that's when you've reached a level of self-mastery that's untouchable. There's a power in knowing that you don't owe the world your energy. You don't need to argue to prove you're right. You don't need to defend your boundaries to those who never respected them in the first place. Your silence is your shield. It filters out what doesn't matter and preserves what does, your peace, your focus, your purpose. So the next time you feel triggered, tempted, or provoked, pause. Remember the sword you carry. Remember that silence is not retreat, it's strategy. And in that strategy, you don't just survive the moment. Elevate above it. The Stoic doesn't just speak less, he speaks only when necessary. And that makes his presence unforgettable because while others waste their breath trying to be heard, he becomes the one they listen to, even in his silence. 8. Not everything deserves a response. One of the most liberating truths you'll ever embrace is that you are not obligated to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't owe the world a reaction. You don't need to prove your perspective in every conversation. You don't have to respond to every provocation, criticism, or request for your attention. In fact, the more intentional you become, the more you realize this. Your energy is currency, and not everything is worth the price. The Stoic understands that reacting to everything is a form of slavery. If every comment pulls you in, every insult drags you down, and every conflict ropes you into an emotional tug-of-war, then you've surrendered your peace to the external. You've made your internal weather dependent on someone else's forecast. But when you begin to choose where your energy goes, a quiet kind of power emerges. A power rooted in choice, not compulsion. You do not need to have the last word. You don't need to convince them you're right. You don't even need to be understood by those who are committed to misunderstanding you. What you need is clarity. Clarity on what matters and what doesn't. And the truth is, most of what comes your way is just noise disguised as urgency. A rude driver, a passive-aggressive text, a social media comment designed to provoke. None of it deserves your sacred attention. Responding is not always a strength. Sometimes it's a distraction. Every moment spent in unnecessary conflict is a moment stolen from your purpose, your creativity, your presence. And if you don't guard your energy with care, the world will consume it without apology. There's a line in Stoic thought that reminds you, if someone does wrong, that is their problem, not yours. You are not the repairman of every broken person. You are not the defender of your name against every whisper. You are not responsible for fixing the world's perception of you. Your task is much simpler and much more powerful. To live with integrity, to act from wisdom, and to stay aligned with your values. Everything else is noise. And that's the shift. Realizing that silence is not a weakness, it's a decision. It's an act of self-respect. You don't respond because you're afraid. You don't respond because you have already decided that your time and energy are too valuable to be spent on the irrelevant. This isn't about detachment in a cold or uncaring way. It's about discernment. It's about knowing that not all things are worth your breath, that your peace is a priority, that your mission in life requires focus, and not every reaction aligns with that mission. So the next time someone says something offensive, pause, ask yourself, is this worth my energy? Will this move me forward? Will this strengthen my character? Or is this just noise bait on a hook that leads nowhere? And if the answer is no, walk away. Not with bitterness, but with calm clarity. Because your silence is not defeat. It's a statement. It's you saying, I am not moved by pettiness. I am not pulled by distraction. I know who I am, and I am building something far too important to be delayed by what doesn't matter. The Stoic doesn't chase applause. He doesn't react to every shout. He walks his path with focus, and that focus makes him unshakable. 9. Offense is taken, not given. We live in a world where being offended has become a reflex, almost like a badge of honor. But the truth is, offense is not something injected into you by someone else. It is something accepted, absorbed, and amplified within your own mind. The Stoics taught that between stimulus and response lies a space. In that space, you decide, will this shake me or will I remain still? And in that decision lies your freedom. Think about it. How often do people offend you unintentionally? A joke said in passing, a comment that touches an old wound, a look you interpreted through the lens of insecurity. It wasn't their words that harmed you. It was the meaning you gave them. Meaning lives inside you. And when you train yourself to pause before assigning meaning, you begin to reclaim control over your emotional life. This is not about being numb, it's about being wise. There is a difference between being blind to harm and choosing not to let every slight rule your mood. You don't have to walk through life with a shield, constantly on guard, but you must walk with awareness, aware that most of the offense you feel is not about the world's intention, but your internal interpretation. A Stoic mind doesn't absorb every energy around it. It filters, it evaluates, it asks, does this deserve to enter my inner sanctuary? Because the truth is, offense is often a trap. It invites you into conflict, into drama, into proving your value through reaction. And every time you take that bait, you make yourself smaller. You allow someone else's ignorance to dictate your inner world. But when you see through the illusion, you begin to unlock emotional invincibility. You understand that the only insults that sting are the ones you believe. If someone called you a failure, and you knew deep in your being that you were growing, learning, evolving, would their words land or would they pass through like wind through an open window? Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed and you haven't been." It's not denial, it's dominion. It's knowing that your dignity does not hang on someone else's words. It's rooted in your character, your clarity, your calm. There is deep strength in being unoffendable, not because you're indifferent, but because you've mastered perspective. You've chosen to no longer let your peace be hijacked by careless remarks, by online comments, by strangers who don't even know your heart. So the next time someone tries to provoke you, remember this. Their words are like arrows shot into the ocean. They can't hurt you unless you wade into their shallow waters and hand them your power. And why would you do that when you've worked so hard to build your peace? Your reaction is your choice. Your inner world is your responsibility. Offense is taken, not given. And today, you can choose to take nothing that doesn't serve your growth. 10. You are not what happens. You are how you respond. There's a moment, a quiet, invisible moment between what life throws at you and what you do with it. That moment is where your freedom lives. Events will come. People will disappoint you. Life will hit hard. But the Stoic doesn't see these things as personal. He sees them as material, as raw clay handed to him by the universe to shape into virtue or bitterness. The event is not you. Your response is. Think about it. If you define yourself by what happens to you, a breakup, a betrayal, a job loss, then your identity becomes reactive, not intentional. You become a mirror of circumstance rather than a creator of character. But what if you flipped it? What if you began to see every event, even the painful ones, as an opportunity to demonstrate who you truly are? That's the Stoic shift from reaction to authorship. Your power doesn't lie in controlling what shows up in your life. That's an illusion. It lies in deciding how you'll meet it. You can meet disrespect with silence. You can meet failure with discipline. You can meet loss with courage. In doing so, you rise above the event and become more than it. Life is not personal, it's a proving ground. Seneca said, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." Every challenge comes with a question. Will you break or will you build? And if you keep choosing the latter again and again, something remarkable happens. You stop fearing the chaos. You stop needing a smooth path. You start trusting that no matter what happens, you will respond in alignment with who you've decided to be. This is not about suppressing emotion or pretending everything is fine. It's about returning to center. The Stoic feels deeply but doesn't let feeling lead. He acknowledges his anger but doesn't lash out. He faces his grief but doesn't collapse. He lets the storm move through him without becoming the storm. That's strength, that's sovereignty. It's tempting to say, I'm like this because of what happened to me. But the Stoic flips the script. I became who I am because of how I responded. That's where transformation lives, in the choice not to surrender your identity to random events. So ask yourself today, in whatever you face, will I reflect this chaos or will I reveal my character? Will I mimic the mess or model the mindset I claim to value? You are not your past. You are not your pain. You are not what they did. You are the space between the still point where your power waits, asking only how will you respond. 11. Let them misunderstand you. Let them talk. There comes a time when silence speaks more loudly than any defense. When you reach a point in life where peace matters more than proving yourself, you begin to realize just how much energy you've wasted trying to correct false impressions. The Stoic doesn't need the world to get it right about him. He doesn't rush to fix every misunderstanding or clarify every judgment. He simply lives and lets the truth of his character rise above the noise. It's not weakness, it's strength. The kind of strength that no longer feeds off validation, no longer flinches at gossip, no longer begs to be seen in a certain light. Because here's the truth. If someone is committed to misunderstanding you, no amount of explanation will change their mind. They don't see you. They see the story they've chosen to tell themselves. And if that story makes them feel stronger, superior, or more comfortable, they'll hold on to it no matter what you say. But when you detach from that, when you truly let go of needing to be understood, you step into emotional sovereignty. You no longer perform for approval. You no longer explain your silence, your standards, your growth. You don't chase closure. You are the closure. You become so rooted in who you are and what you stand for that other people's opinions start sounding like background static, present but powerless. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." That's the shift from explanation to embodiment, from defending to demonstrating. The Stoic knows his life is his message, not his words, not his rebuttals, his life. People will always talk. That's what people do. But the less you respond, the louder your actions become. When you stay calm in the face of criticism, you show maturity. When you keep building despite being doubted, you show resilience. And when you rise without needing revenge, that's power. Let them misunderstand you. Let them reduce you, mock you, twist your intentions. Their noise reveals them, not you. Your silence reveals your growth. It says, I no longer need to be seen as right. I just need to be right with myself. And in the end, that's what freedom feels like, when your peace no longer depends on their understanding and your value, no longer hinges on their perception, you become unshakable. Not because they changed, but because you did. 12. Emotional freedom begins with radical responsibility. There's a moment, and it doesn't come easy, when you finally stop looking outward for someone to blame. Not because you were wronged any less, not because life became more fair, but because you understand a deeper truth. No matter who hurt you, no matter what they said or failed to do, your healing, your peace, your emotional sovereignty is your job. No one is coming to save you, and that's not tragic. It's liberating. The Stoic path begins where blame ends. Because the longer you point the finger, the more you stay entangled in the very pain you want to escape. When you say they made me angry, you've handed them the keys to your nervous system. When you say they ruined my day, you've made them the author of your emotional life. But emotional freedom means reclaiming that authorship, one choice, one reaction at a time. It's not about denial. The Stoic doesn't pretend pain didn't happen. He simply refuses to be defined by it. You were betrayed. Feel it. But don't become bitterness. You were judged. Accept it. But don't live under their narrative. You were left. Mourn it. But rise and keep rising until your story no longer revolves around their absence. Radical responsibility means this. Everything that enters your mind, every thought you entertain, every feeling you act upon, it's yours to manage. You can't control what others throw at you, but you can control what you hold on to. And that is not a burden. It's the most powerful form of freedom you'll ever taste. Seneca wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." That friction, those daily provocations, insults, losses, they're not just annoyances, they are the forge. They test your ability to pause before reacting. They challenge you to grow, not because life is easy, but because you've chosen to become someone who transcends chaos. So the next time you're triggered, pause. Ask yourself, what is this reaction teaching me about me? That question alone is a revolution. It transforms blame into awareness. It replaces helplessness with power. And over time, it rewires your entire nervous system toward clarity, resilience, and presence. Emotional untouchability is not about suppression. It's about conscious mastery. It's about being able to feel everything without being ruled by anything. And that begins always with ownership. Complete, radical, unapologetic ownership of your inner world. You are not fragile. You are not at the mercy of others. You are not here to react endlessly to a world that never asked for your peace. You are here to build it anyway from the inside out. You don't become emotionally untouchable by building walls. You become untouchable by becoming deeply rooted, by knowing exactly who you are, what you stand for, and what no longer deserves your energy. The Stoic doesn't seek to escape emotion. He seeks to master it. And mastery doesn't mean control in the rigid sense. It means harmony, presence, the ability to feel fully without being pulled under. In a world that constantly tests your patience, your worth, your identity, your power lies in this. You do not owe the world a reaction. You owe yourself alignment. You owe yourself peace. And when you choose that peace again and again in the face of criticism, rejection, misunderstanding, you don't just protect your energy. You evolve quietly, deeply, permanently. So take these Stoic truths and wear them like armor, not to close yourself off, but to open yourself more wisely. Speak less, but mean more. Expect less, but give more intentionally. Seek less noise, but cultivate more clarity. And most of all, remember your emotional life is yours, not theirs, not anyone else's to distort or dictate. If this episode sparked something in you, if it reminded you of your strength, your responsibility, your potential, I invite you to take a moment right now, not just to reflect, but to share this message with someone who needs it. Subscribe for more Stoic reflections. Comment with what principle spoke to you most, and keep walking this path, because the strongest version of you is not loud, not reactive, not desperate, but centered, wise, and absolutely unshakable.